Yellowfang's Secret. This may be one of the most infamous books in the series, and for good reason. It's kind of a miserable experience whether you're trying to read it for fun or analyze it for characterization, development, or lore. It's not controversial, it's just bad. But I have heard more people in the modern day willing to look over its faults in favor of more readily hating the newer flop super editions we've received. So, with all the modern context, how bad is Yellowfang's Secret? Is it still worthy of being one of the worst books in the series? Let's venture. Yellowfang's Secret was released on October 9th of 2012, 1 month after Misty Star's Omen, 6 months after the Flood and The Last Hope, and over a year after the previous super edition, Crooked Star's Promise. This one was written by Cherith Baldry, much like ShadowClan's Destiny, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry for this stain on your record. I hold no ill will towards you, Cherith, and I love plenty of your books. I'm sorry you had to write this at all, because I cannot imagine being stuck in this world for months on end. Statistics-wise, there are 77 different speaking roles in the cast, and the top 10 cats in that cast have 75% of the lines. So, like other super editions, we have a higher chance of getting a richer cast built up in this book, where we have heard of, let alone come to understand, so few of them before. The she-cat statistics are less encouraging. Of the 77 speaking cast members, only 35% of them are she-cats, and the only reason the she-cats even get 60% of the lines is because Yellowfang has the vast majority of the book's lines overall. More than a third of them, and Sagewhisker is there too. Almost every other prominent character in the book is a Tom, and ShadowClan at large seems very Tom-dominated, which is an interesting choice for the famously villainous and careless clan they are at this point in history. We know Shadowstar, a she-cat, was ShadowClan's original leader thanks to the field guides, but throughout all of modern history, in the super editions and main series, we have exclusively had Tom leaders for ShadowClan. So, just make of that what you will. The allegiances for this book are also mainly taken from Crooked Star's Promise, but more cats have been added to ShadowClan, and we went back in time, as Yellowfang is older than Crooked Star. From there, I suppose it's time we get into it. The prologue is a half-moon meeting where Featherpaw of ThunderClan gets to meet StarClan for the first time. Molepelt, ShadowClan's medicine cat from the generation where SkyClan was banished, warns him of a dark, poisonous force that will come from a ShadowClan medicine cat and spread to all the other clans. He has been waiting since his time for the clans to be punished for their treatment of SkyClan, and now he believes it is coming. Other StarClan cats are angry at Molepelt for spilling all of this on an apprentice, and believe that the Medicine Cat Code will prevent the fate Molepelt warns of. So Featherpaw leaves without any particular sense of direction. With that lovely note, we open the numbered chapters with Yellowkit playing with her siblings, Nutkit and Rowankit, when Raggedkit and Scorchkit come over to scorn them for their childish ways. Raggedkit also reacts particularly aggressively when Nutkit calls him a kitty pet, as no one in the clan is sure who he and Scorchkit's father is, and, rumors have sprouted. Yellowkit seems more careful and observant than her siblings, and also has a goal already, to be a great queen like her mother and a great warrior like her father. Raggedpaw and Scorchpaw are made into apprentices, but during the ceremony, Yellowkit can't stop squirming because she feels a painful thorn in her paw, one that neither her mother nor she can see. As she goes to ask the medicine cat Sagewhisker about it, an elder walks out of the medicine den, having lost a thorn of his own, and Yellowkit's paw doesn't hurt anymore. Soon after, she gets a stomachache, alongside Nutkit, without eating crow food. Nutkit recovers much more slowly than Yellowkit, so to stave off her hunger, Yellowkit agrees to help Sagewhisker in the medicine den, and she's very happy to have some herb knowledge since it could make her an even cooler warrior. After a time skip, 2 younger kittens are 4 moons old, Foxkit and Wolfkit, and Foxkit's arrogance already ticks Yellowkit off. Also, Silverflame, Yellowkit's beloved grandmother, is getting very old and refusing to eat. Yellowpaw and her siblings are made apprentices, with Yellowpaw getting Deerleap as a mentor. When they're about to explore the territory, though, Yellowpaw feels a sharp pain through her belly, which Silverflame also seems to be experiencing. With Silverflame being cared for, the pain clears up enough for Yellowpaw to indeed explore the territory. She learns a lot, but still has her mind on her grandmother, and returns home to learn that Silverflame is heading to StarClan. Time passes, and Deerleap is working Yellowpaw very hard, but though she performatively complains about this to her siblings, she is actually excited by how much more skilled this extra work will make her. They meet up with Yellowpaw's siblings and Raggedpaw and Scorchpaw to battle train. As they practice, Scorchpaw accidentally uses unsheathed claws and cuts Rowanpaw's shoulder. In the same moment, Yellowpaw feels pain in her own shoulder, but again it clears up as Rowanpaw leaves to see Sagewhisker. Yellowpaw gets to do some practice with Raggedpaw, who helps her perfect her technique, and at the end she feels very grateful. More time passes, and Foxpaw and Wolfpaw are apprentices, both annoying the older apprentices to no end. And Yellowpaw and Foxpaw are paired up for a hunting exercise, but find WindClan scent and prey scraps on ShadowClan's side of the border instead. Foxpaw wants to attack them immediately, but Yellowpaw demands that they report it to their mentors. When they find the WindClan trail, Yellowpaw and her siblings, along with Raggedpaw and Scorchpaw, are allowed to come along for the fight. Raggedpaw ends up rescuing Yellowpaw, unnecessarily, which she is annoyed about, but they win the skirmish regardless, and Raggedpaw is made a warrior for his bravery, Raggedpelt. Raggedpelt comes to personally apologize to Yellowpaw for stepping in and say he's looking forward to going on patrols with her. Yellowpaw attends her second gathering and sees Raggedpelt have a disagreement with Foxpaw, as well as be confronted by the WindClan cats they fought. She sticks up for him in both cases, but Raggedpelt gets extremely angry when they bring up his potential kitty pet lineage. Apparently even Featherstorm, Raggedpelt's mom, won't tell him who his father is, and Raggedpelt desperately wants to know, one way or the other. Yellowpaw spends the next morning grilling the elders to track down information on Raggedpelt's father, and invites Raggedpelt out that night to go to the Two-Light Place where Featherstorm spent time in the moons before her pregnancy. The kitty pets there are aggressive and don't have any reason to answer the clan cat's questions, but one of them wants to make sure they stay away and takes them to meet Hal, who denies having anything to do with Featherstorm or Raggedpelt, but who Yellowpaw recognizes as having an almost identical physique to his son. ShadowClan raids the Carrion Place for rats, and Raggedpelt, still cold and distant to Yellowpaw after meeting his maybe-father, comes along as well. Yellowpaw ends up catching the biggest rat of the day, which earns her a lot of praise from everyone except Raggedpelt. Yellowpaw and her siblings take the trip to the Moonstone, and Sagewhisker seems to give her a little more attention as she tells them to listen to what StarClan says, as it may show them their destinies. Yellowpaw gets a vision of her warrior name, Yellowfang, as well as a torrent of strange images. Deerleap tells her not to talk about whatever she saw, but to use her sight of the future wisely. However, Yellowpaw isn't sure she can tell what her future is, save for becoming a warrior, and then confusion. Yellowfang, Nutwhisker, and Rowanberry become warriors, with Scorchwind having received his name a moon prior, and Yellowfang still has the older warriors and younger apprentices' arrogance on both sides. Sagewhisker comes to congratulate Yellowfang and ask if the Moonstone had shown her serving as a warrior, which Yellowfang brushes off. On a patrol, Yellowfang finds that there are prey thieves from the Two-Lake Place, and they end up in a battle. Yellowfang hesitates to fight with Red and Boulder, cat she recognized from her and Raggedpelt's secret outing, being in attendance, but eventually jumps in. Raggedpelt also threatens Red into silence, so that's probably not an issue. What is an issue, though, is that Yellowfang spends the whole time feeling buffeted by blows, including when she's the one doing the hitting. By the end of the battle, she can't even stand, and Sagewhisker finally breaks down what has been going on. Anytime someone around her is hurt, she feels that pain as if it was her own. Sagewhisker concludes that StarClan has given Yellowfang this power because she is meant to be a medicine cat, which Yellowfang immediately refuses. She decides she can cope with these feelings and still be a warrior. Also, Red and Boulder show up and say they'd like to join ShadowClan to learn to hunt and fight like they do. They are allowed one trial moon to decide if they will be allowed to stay in ShadowClan. Raggedpelt does not like this development, as evident by his cold, silent frowns and distance from Yellowfang again. Red becomes Russetpaw, and Boulder asks to stay as Boulder. Cedarstar is willing to accept them to ensure that no other clan gets 2 more fighters in their ranks, and Yellowfang is willing to be friendly as long as they keep her and Raggedpelt secret. But the entire rest of ShadowClan is appalled that kitty pets are being made warriors. Yellowfang goes to assure Raggedpelt that they aren't going to spill their secret, but gets cut off when Raggedpelt is attacked by a badger. She forces herself to avoid thinking about the pain she's going through so that she can fight until he can get away safely. Raggedpelt calls her a mousebrain for trying to step in on her own, but also shows concern for her. Sagewhisker uses this as another opportunity to say that she should be a medicine cat, which Yellowfang still refuses. Raggedpelt also thanks her for saving his life, and Yellowfang gets to lead a patrol to get the badger out of their territory, which turns out to be unnecessary, as the badger already fled with the cubs after the fight Yellowfang gave her. Yellowfang and Raggedpelt are friends again, and Foxpaw has been more irritable than ever. Oh, and she and Wolfpaw are becoming warriors, by the way. Wolfstep and Foxheart. Neither the extremely pompous Foxheart, nor Yellowfang, nor any other cat point out how they just named their new warrior an extreme insult. Littlebird, a nice elder, calls Yellowfang over to say she sees how close she and Raggedpelt have been getting, point out how they've fallen out of friendship for long periods before, and remind her that she doesn't have to rush into a mate. Then Yellowfang and Raggedpelt almost immediately get into an argument about whether Russetpaw and Boulder can be trusted or not. Yellowfang feels the intense hunger of Nettlespot, a queen who is very thin and having a hard time, as it is a leaf bear. She agrees to bring Nettlespot herbs to stave off the hunger, but doesn't appreciate being treated like Sagewhisker's apprentice, particularly as the medicine cat starts coming to Yellowfang with reports of how cats are doing and expecting her to do medicine cat jobs. Another cat hurts her shoulder while on patrol with Yellowfang and antagonizes the kitty pets with news that Russetpaw and Boulder are in ShadowClan. Sagewhisker directs Yellowfang to help in their treatment until Yellowfang can get out to speak with Raggedpelt instead about the kitty pet encounter. Just the knowledge that the kitty pets are involved again causes Raggedpelt to lash out and demand that Yellowfang leave him alone, shortly before those very kitty pets attack camp to get Russetpaw and Boulder back. Raggedpelt has a confrontation with Featherstorm and Hal and learns that Hal is his father, but has no interest in being a part of his life. When Hal taunts Raggedpelt further with his kitty pet heritage, Raggedpelt becomes so angry that he murders Hal and expresses no shock or regret when Yellowfang sees. In fact, when other warriors come by, he lies and says he only killed Hal because the kitty pet was going to kill Yellowfang. Russetpaw mourns over Hal softly because he was apparently her father too. The kitty pets leave, though they say first that they came on Hal's idea, as he wasn't going to give up on his daughter, and they'll never forget him. Raggedpelt is still volatile, especially around Yellowfang and the former kitty pets, to the point of demanding Yellowfang thank him for saving her based on the lie he completely made up after Hal's murder. He then immediately pivots into how cool it would be if one day he became leader and he could make Yellowfang his deputy. Yellowfang reasons that Raggedpelt's behavior must be because of how hard his life has been, and enjoys the idea of being with him. She also notes when they arrive back at camp that Littlebird has a fever, so she gets Sagewhisker on that. Raggedpelt finds her again to ask her to join him in some battle training with Foxheart and Wolfstep, and when she wants to go hunting instead because of how little leaf bear prey there is, he gets upset and accuses her of not really caring about being a good warrior. She goes out on a patrol led by Deerleap and ends up finding Coltsfoot before they find any prey, which Deerleap agrees to let her return to Sagewhisker before rejoining the hunt. On the way, she comes across Raggedpelt and Foxheart, and they scorn her for getting herbs because, as Raggedpelt tells her, she is not a medicine cat. Any cat would think she didn't want to be a warrior with this behavior, and she can only prove herself if she agrees to go battle training with him again, which she won't right now. Littlebird is having trouble breathing, which wakes Yellowfang, and Sagewhisker only steps in to confirm that, yep, that herb is correct, before sleeping again, leaving Yellowfang to pick up the slack. Raggedpelt jokes about her future being as his deputy, not as his medicine cat. WindClan invades blatantly while Yellowfang is on patrol, and she ends up incapacitated by others' wounds, leaving her to actually be injured while she's distracted, until Raggedpelt's patrol comes to help and drive WindClan off. Sagewhisker takes this opportunity to demand she be a medicine cat now. During her recovery, Yellowfang still hasn't agreed, but is helping where Sagewhisker needs her to. Russetpaw and Boulder are also made warriors, Russetfur and, still, Boulder. Raggedpelt starts pressuring Yellowfang to return to battle training with him so she won't be injured again. Cloudkit is vomiting though, and Yellowfang is able to find and administer the exact herb he needs to get better. Sagewhisker says once again that she's meant to be a medicine cat. None of them ask for their destinies, but they have to follow them. Yellowfang asks for time to think it over, and Sagewhisker says she's had enough time and she needs to start training now. Yellowfang rationalizes that it will be better to have a second medicine cat with Sagewhisker getting old, and finally agrees. She tells Raggedpelt about this, and he asks if she's a coward, if the WindClan battle scared her too much. She promises it's just that she can't inflict pain anymore, and this is her destiny. Raggedpelt says she'll lose him too. He thought she cared about them and their life together, but clearly she doesn't. The clan greets the announcement of her change in status with complete silence. Sagewhisker begins her instruction with how to control her power, then how to sort herbs in the storage, and then sends her off to clean out bedding. Foxheart and Lizardstripe naturally take the opportunity to make fun of her. Then Sagewhisker comes to berate her about using herbs wrong and complain that he thought she knew more than that. On her literal first day of actual training. I hate my life. We'll be coming back to this, don't worry. Yellowfang and Sagewhisker attend the Medicine Cat gathering, and Yellowfang meets Silverflame again, who tells her to trust herself. Yellowfang continues medicine catting, very few cats trust her, and a rat attack happens, leaving many cats wounded. While Sagewhisker and Yellowfang treat the wounds, Raggedpelt comes up with an idea to fight the rats more efficiently and is put in charge of the mission, earning a lot of praise in the process. However, there are so many rats that the clan has to flee. Many of their herbs were left behind, and Cedarstar is on his last life. Cedarstar's not disappointed in Raggedpelt or his plan, though, and promises him Cloudkit as an apprentice. Raggedpelt is honored, but very angry at himself, and lashes out at Yellowfang as a result. At the gathering, Stonetooth is retiring from being deputy, and Raggedpelt is given his position, despite not yet having an apprentice. Raggedpelt takes Yellowfang aside privately and asks if she's really okay with her choice. The possibility of them being leader and deputy is more likely than ever if she wants it, but Yellowfang points out that StarClan has determined her destiny. Raggedpelt says that they can have her as a medicine cat, but he wants to be able to continue their relationship, and Yellowfang says she can keep a secret. She's very happy with him, and StarClan doesn't send any warnings, but he does keep asking if she really definitely wants to be a medicine cat. She's still an apprentice and could quit at any time, and he doesn't take no for an answer. Then Cloudpaw gets hurt, and Yellowfang dedicates herself day and night to saving him, which she eventually does. When Cloudpaw is saved, Sagewhisker offers to make her a full medicine cat, and Yellowfang knows she is ready. Sagewhisker also already knew about Raggedpelt and allows Yellowfang to tell him before they leave. He takes the news about as well as we'd expect from him. He blows up at her, blames everything on her, says Foxheart is nothing to him and he needs Yellowfang, and stops talking to her as soon as she gets her ceremony. While at the Moonstone, Silverflame shows her that she's going to have kits, tells her to make her own choice, and gives no other advice before she disappears. Lizardstripe is complaining in the meantime about having to stay in the nursery with kits while the Toms get to patrol as normal. Then StarClan warns Yellowfang that there's a cat coming who should never be born, and who StarClan is powerless to stop. One of her kits. Sagewhisker knows Yellowfang is expecting and advises her to tell Raggedpelt. He's extremely excited to be a father, but also assumes she'll quit being a medicine cat to be a mother. When she says she won't, he berates her further, especially given his sensitivity around letting kits grow up with only one known parent. Yellowfang has her kits, almost exactly as depicted in Secrets of the Clans, with Brokenkit being born extremely evil, the other two completely unnamed kits being born dead or seconds from death, and Brokenkit being given to Lizardstripe to care for. The only big difference is that Raggedpelt is deputy, not leader. No, Hopekit and Wishkit are not names that show up in this book either. They don't show up in any book. Vicky made these names up in a letter to a fan, and that's it. Sagewhisker takes over visiting Lizardstripe and Brokenkit to avoid Yellowfang getting emotional, and Yellowfang instead focuses on helping Nightpaw, Foxheart's new apprentice who has consistent breathing problems. Also, Foxheart hates both Yellowfang and Nightpaw for his weakness, and has been getting very close to Raggedpelt. Yellowfang is miserable. At the Moonstone, Silverflame admits that she knew all of this was happening, but StarClan didn't reach out because they were sure Yellowfang wouldn't listen. Even though she was explicitly looking out for any signs from StarClan saying they might not approve. Silverflame does advise, now, that she could still be a force for good in Brokenkit's life, so Yellowfang steps in when Lizardstripe's other kittens are bullying him, and invites Brokenkit to help her with some chores while she tells him he is loved. Brokenkit helps out sometimes, but doesn't want to be a medicine cat, and is somewhat obsessed with fighting and strength. Also, Nightpaw, now Nightpelt, still has a constant cough that nothing has cured, and Brokenkit is starting to be bullied for hanging out with the medicine cat, so he turns on Yellowfang and starts playing all by himself, save for when Raggedpelt comes to coach him in battle moves. Oh, and Sagewhisker dies. Nightpelt soon becomes Brokenpaw's mentor in an attempt to curb the young Tom's reckless aggressive streak, but really Brokenpaw just ends up not respecting his mentor. Running Paw also becomes Yellowfang's apprentice. Brokenpaw is already obsessed with nothing but fighting and becoming clan leader one day. He gets into a fight at the gathering, which Raggedpelt tries to make excuses for. Brokenpaw has also been encouraging other apprentices to train with unsheathed claws, leading to injuries for Yellowfang to fix. And Nightpelt admits that Brokenpaw will never listen to him, so he gave up trying. Cedarstar dies, making Raggedpelt the new leader, and Molepelt reminds Yellowfang of his prophecy of Brokenstar doom, while Raggedkit gets his 9 lives. Raggedkit makes Foxheart his deputy, and quickly makes Brokenpaw Brokentail, who is being made a warrior early because of obvious bias. Yellowfang sees blood on his fur and hears Molepelt again. Yellowfang asks that Nightpelt be removed from warrior duties because of his chronic cough, and Raggedkit agrees to ask, but only to go through with it if he agrees too. Around camp, more and more cats are not only admiring, but trying to earn the respect of Brokentail, and less cats are respecting Yellowfang, if they ever did in the first place. Brokentail then comes up with a better plan to attack the rats, and is called in to discuss it privately with Raggedkit, the very deed that earned Raggedpelt the deputyship not long ago. Nightpelt has also decided to join the Elders early. ShadowClan fights the rats again, brutally. Foxheart is killed, but they win overall, and Cloudpelt is made the new deputy, much to Brokentail's disgust. Raggedkit explains that it's because he can't look like he's showing favoritism, but Brokentail will be the next deputy. Brokentail gets Stumpy Paw as an apprentice, continues to be brutal, and Yellowfang continues to be appalled. She reports his behavior to Cloudpelt, who says it's not his place to interfere with unless someone actually gets hurt. Running Paw becomes Running Nose, and Yellowfang gets more visions of blood, death, and kit destruction coming to ShadowClan. Brokentail comes back with proof of WindClan hunting on their territory as an excuse to attack them. Even Raggedkit wants to check the claim first, which angers Brokentail, but that doesn't mean Raggedkit is willing to entertain the idea that his son is lying, especially since that idea comes from Yellowfang. ShadowClan attacks, but needs to retreat when Cloudpelt is gravely injured. Yellowfang tries to heal him, while Brokentail tells her directly not to bother because he should have been deputy and now he will be. Yellowfang tries to explain this to Raggedkit and urge him not to make Brokentail deputy, but he blows up at her again and goes through with his plan anyway. Lots of kits are born, cats keep getting overworked and injured, the clan is focusing more on battle and less on taking care of the elders, everyone listens to Brokentail and no one listens to the medicine cats, Yellowfang goes to the Moonstone and sees yet more visions of blood, death, and destruction. Can we speed this up? I feel like a broken record. Oh, and Silverflame outright says no one can change what happens now. Great. Raggedkit actually had the same dream as Yellowfang for once, and actually realizes he made a mistake with Brokentail, at which point he suddenly shifts to calling Brokentail our rather than my son, which Yellowfang points out too, as she tells him it's his problem to fix. Raggedkit gives Brokentail a scolding, and expects that to work completely. And then Raggedkit ends up dead by WindClan's border. Yellowfang even tosses in that a leader can lose all 9 lives at once if their wounds are severe enough, and oh boy, so we're pretending what happened with Tigerstar is just normal? Brokentail pretends to mourn a lot, and then goes to the Moonstone where he receives lives from Cedarstar, Stonetooth, Dawnstar, some Grey Tom, Lizardfang, one of Brokentail's sisters, some Brown Tabby, some Black and White Cat, and Sagewhisker for following the code, duty, honor, truth, judgment, love, clear sight, strength, and compassion, respectively. Raggedkit does not give him a life. Brokenstar makes Blackfoot his deputy, another cat without an apprentice, and makes the 2 young kitten Mosskit his own apprentice. Even more kits are born. Brokenstar consistently disobeys the code, makes apprentices too early, and has been waging war on WindClan and encouraging violence, and it's still resulting in a lot of injuries or even deaths for Yellowfang to clean up. Then the elders are banished because they're weak and taking up prey in care time. Nightpelt, as the youngest and fittest of them, leads them out and takes care of them. StarClan has also been ignoring all of Yellowfang's prayers for guidance to the point that she thinks they may support this. Yellowfang has completely lost hope, and her only grounding force is Running Wind, who asks her to not give up on her clanmates because of this leader. And she appreciates how steadfast and loyal he is, but still doesn't feel good about the future. Turns out, she shouldn't, because Brightflower's kits go missing, and Yellowfang finds them dead in the woods. She heard a fox bark ahead of them, and assumes it killed the kits, though Brokenstar is also quick to come by and declare her the murderer instead, exiling her from the clan with only Running Nose believing in her innocence. As she tries to take care of herself, we play through her introduction scene with Firepaw from Into the Wild, though her sharp tongue and bravado is definitely more exaggerated than it has been in the past 10 chapters we've spent with her, to the point that it almost seems like a different character, and she promises in her head to eventually bring down her son. That isn't the end, though, because we still have the comic at the back by Dan Jolie and James L. Barry, which fast-forwards to Yellowfang as ThunderClan's medicine cat having bad dreams of her murder of Brokentail. Yellowfang has a good support system now, but she is worried StarClan may not accept her, or even her apprentice, considering her actions. She names her apprentice Cinderpelt at the Moonstone meeting and prays StarClan will treat her kindly. In her own dreams, she meets Molepelt again, who wants to apologize for Brokentail. His destiny was already written, and Yellowfang suffered by making herself guilty over him. Sagewhisker comes over as well to say she would have never forced Yellowfang to be a medicine cat if she knew what lay in store, but Yellowfang says she doesn't regret a single day of it. StarClan doesn't blame her for Brokentail's death, and Cinderpelt was welcomed as well. Yellowfang can go in peace. Okay, give me a minute. That was a beast of a book. I actually needed significantly more time than usual to read and take notes on it, just because I kept needing to pause and take breaks to calm myself down. There is a lot to talk about, and I don't want to make this video longer than The Last Hopes, so I'm going to start with the broader topics and admit that I won't be able to cover everything. First of all, this is a very boring book to read. If you are familiar with the first arc, and especially if you've read Secrets of the Clans, there are no new plot threads for you to latch on to. You'll learn some new things about individual ShadowClan cats, and may enjoy spending some more time with cats like Russet Fur or Running Nose to learn their backstories, but nothing is going to surprise you much, save for times like a fox seemingly killing the kits rather than Brokentail, or Brokentail being leader for significantly more than 4 moons, or Nightpelt being a young Tom that downright contradict established canon. Even if this is your first Warriors book, though, it's still likely going to be boring because nothing much happens in it. We cycle through periods of training, skirmishes with WindClan or the kitty pets or the rats, gatherings and half-moon gatherings, and poor relationship dynamics, but nothing evolves or changes through any of it, save for increasing brutality as Brokentail comes in, and it makes it really hard to keep reading. Speaking of, let's touch lightly on clan culture. Unlike RiverClan, where we learned about floating dens, obstacle courses, generations of warriors with different dynamics and ideals, and otherwise, ShadowClan has exactly 2 new cultural details. The carry-in-place raids for rats being a staple of the clan, and 1 singular mention of tail signals being used to direct cats in battle. That aside, all of the unique culture ShadowClan has is in the personalities, dynamics, and values of the clan. And they are all really not good. They have no positive clan relations, and a very surface-level hatred of WindClan and the City Cats, with no ThunderClan in sight. The overwhelming culture of ShadowClan, starting at the youngest kitten stages and long before Brokenstar or even Raggedkit are in charge, is one of arrogance, competitiveness, and a focus on violence, power, and nationalistic pride in your clan. As a rule, every clan considers themselves the best and gets hyped at the idea of battle, but in ShadowClan that pride is amped up further by a need for every cat to specifically be the best and most loved warrior for their warrior-specific skills: hunting, fighting, and taking charge. It is considered a weakness or oddity for Yellowfang to talk to the elders instead of learn battle moves in her first moons of life, or for her to even appreciate learning about herbs to make herself a more skilled warrior. Brokenkit is teased harshly for even hanging out with the medicine cats, and anyone who displays tenderness or mercy to anyone besides their own kits is considered to be out of character with the clan's values. They have a couple nice elders and, 3 nice cats dotted through Yellowfang's lifetime, but it's considered weak and useless to spend much time with them since they're all medicine cats, elders, or currently or chronically sick. Yellowfang has no friends for the majority of this book. Rowanberry makes a point of saying she was Yellowfang's friend when she becomes a medicine cat, but they didn't spend much time together or share any interests, and it's she who draws away from Yellowfang intentionally, when she doesn't have to. At the end of the book, Running Nose and Nightpelt are probably the closest things Yellowfang has to friends, but her situation is so miserable at that point that there isn't any time for fun bonding, and neither of her friends can do, or even try to do, anything about the situation ShadowClan is in. Given what all happens in this clan, in this book and in the future, maybe that's an accurate way to depict the clan, but you know what it isn't? Fun. This is not a fun clan to spend any time in as a reader, and it's hard to even care about the clan falling apart at the end because it seemed awful from day one. That being said, there was one depiction of a relationship that I actually appreciated: Deerleap's role as Yellowfang's mentor. I would actually say it's one of the best mentor depictions I have seen in the entire series. Deerleap focuses on individual skills he can teach one at a time to build up an arsenal of abilities, and teaches rules that are easy to remember and generalize, that Yellowfang even calls back to long into her warrior days. He responds to errors by asking the student to identify what went wrong rather than just marking it as a failure, and then immediately gives her a chance to repeat the task with that mistake in mind, to generate improvement that he can then reward with specific praise, not only giving her confidence, but teaching her that mistakes are learning opportunities, not judgments. He encourages creativity and experimentation and builds off of his students' ideas, allowing Yellowfang to flourish and make her own choices, which ends up making her into an extremely skilled and praised warrior. Genuinely, the only issue I have with him is that he has a very, very strong work ethic and expects his student to work significantly longer and harder than others around her. But that's honestly just how warriors' society seems to function. On the other hand, Sagewhisker is very much not a good mentor. She shows little to no empathy for her adult students' feelings and situation, makes consistent demands that she just expects Yellowfang to follow, only points out when she's doing things wrong, and expresses disappointment and irritation when she isn't perfect on the first try, tells her destiny is set in stone with no room for personal input, and never takes an interest in Yellowfang's life. Even when she was apparently aware of things like her relationship with Raggedpelt or her pregnancy, she didn't step in to help, provide comfort or advice, or even warn against potential consequences. It also isn't lost on me that the emotional medicine cat bad mentor is a she-cat, while the strong, confident, level-headed good warrior mentor is a tom. Perhaps it's one of the symptoms of the power is everything, emotions are weakness culture ShadowClan apparently has, but this book leans very hard into some gendered stereotypes. ShadowClan at large is all very hardened and violent, but all of the most successful and praised warriors, aside from Yellowfang herself, are toms. Cedarstar, Stonetooth, Raggedkit, Brokenstar, Deerleap, Brackenfoot, Cloudpelt, Archeye, and Blackfoot are all toms. We have Russetfur, but she's in a pair with Boulder, and both were scorned more than praised for having been city cats, despite being capable. Nightpelt and Runningnose are kind and sensitive toms, but aren't respected precisely because of that sensitivity, and were made into an elder and medicine cat, as those are some of the only acceptable places to be compassionate in this clan. It also gets worse when you look into more specific cases. This book has 2 separate cases where a tom has 2 she-cat mates at seemingly the same time, something that has never been done before in book canon. The less severe of the 2 centers around Toadskip, who has Poolcloud as a mate with Foxheart and Woolstep as kits, and then Nittlespot about a generation later, which produces Cloudpelt. We don't see it, but we can presume that Toadskip and Poolcloud may have broken up before he got together with Nittlespot. The same cannot be said for Blizzardwing's mates, though. Late in the book, he is said to be mates with Hollyflower and Featherstorm, and their litters are far, far too close together for him to have not had these kits around the same time, especially with how early kits were being made apprentices by this point. The impacts of these relationships are never touched upon. In fact, the book doesn't even tell us that this is happening, intentionally or otherwise, but it adds to the reader's experience of the clan as not caring about its queens and kits in the hypermasculine ideals of their society. I also regret to say that this isn't even the worst Yellowfang secret gets with its poor gender portrayals. I'm putting aside discussion of Yellowfang's situation specifically until later, as there are many layers to discuss, but there are 2 other prominent she-cat stories that try to actively worsen readers' opinions of women in this world: Foxheart and Lizardstripe. Both of these characters were very loosely established in the Secrets of the Clan scene that is copied almost verbatim into this book. Foxheart was an arrogant she-cat who fancied Raggedkit, or Raggedpelt, and cats thought she was getting close to him and taking credit for his kit for the power it would grant her. Lizardstripe was a sharp-tongued mother who never wanted kittens and treated her own kits, let alone Brokenstar, with neglect or outright cruelty. She was only convinced to take Raggedkit's kit because it would grant her further power in the clan. These were the bases that Yellowfang's secret had to work off of, but they did not change or add to either character at all. Foxheart is arrogant from the day she is born, yearns to be with Raggedpelt from the beginning before he gets any kind of prestige, and hates Yellowfang for being close to him, and is only ever treated as an annoyance or bully through the entirety of the narrative. Lizardstripe is almost exclusively shown during her time as a mother, where she hates her situation, lashes out at her mate, or former mate, for not helping, and neglects or lashes out at her kits as well. Outside of that context, she's mostly just shown hanging out with Foxheart because apparently two-dimensional antagonistic she-cats stick together. The issue is that both of these characters, Lizardstripe especially, have significantly more depth to their situations than are actually portrayed in their characters. People, and cats, aren't born arrogant, duplicitous, or jealous, and Foxheart wasn't even as power-hungry as Secrets of the Clans let her come off as. Generally, if you're that desperate to be loved by a particular partner and to prove yourself as the best in a clan, it's because the environment you grew up in encouraged that through only rewarding the best and only giving you attention when you are, or are with someone who is, exceeding expectations. Raggedpelt and Yellowfang were, without question, the most skilled and accomplished graduates of their generation, and the fact that Foxheart wants desperately to be chosen by one of them and hated the other implies to me that there is more going on here than love. Raggedkit fully admitted that he didn't care about Foxheart, and seemed to only even choose her as deputy out of spite for Yellowfang. And, as I've mentioned, ShadowClan was not a happy place to grow up in. With all of this in mind, the fact that Foxheart died with no one considering her more than a nuisance or a pawn in some larger social game just makes me feel sad for her. The opposite of the shallow opinion the narrative wants me to have. And Lizardstripe's position is even worse. She's not only portrayed as a bad mother, but the textbook bad mother, who never wanted kits and lets everyone know it, puts no effort into raising her children, and abuses the extra kitten she didn't ever want. When the topic of warriors' worst mothers comes up, she and Rainflower inevitably make the shortlist. However, in Rainflower's case, what made her bad is that she coddled her kittens when they were aesthetically perfect and strong and successful, and shunned and abused her kit when he became anything else. Lizardstripe simply never wanted kittens in the first place, and her first grievance is that her mate, Mudclaw, does no work at all to help her, and she has to be stuck in the nursery for moons, a task she doesn't want, while he can continue his warrior's duties as normal, which is a genuinely unfair element of their society. I already pointed out the flaws in Shellheart's role as Rainflower's mate, and the power that he could have held if he intervened more in Crookedjaw's childhood. But Mudclaw's conspicuous absence is even worse, as it now comes across as if Lizardstripe is in a very unbalanced relationship of her own, with a Tom who doesn't care about her in the least, and that she isn't given any support from the rest of the clan with the litter she is thrust into having. If Lizardstripe was a human with access to more advanced knowledge and medical care, I can pretty much guarantee she would not have had kits in the first place, and been much happier. I don't condone the way Lizardstripe treated her kits by any means, but her situation is much more complex than this book tries to frame it, which creates a significant dissonance between the reader and the narrative, and is unfortunately a theme with most main characters and relationships in this book. On that note, it's time we talk about Yellowfang. This book's position is that Yellowfang was always destined to be a medicine cat, was made for this job and skilled at it, and would enjoy it as soon as she finally put her paws on the right path. However, this is also Yellowfang, an extremely beloved first art character who we don't want to show failing for the first 18 chapters of this 40-chapter book. Yes, that is almost half the book, good on you for noticing, before she finally chooses to be a medicine cat apprentice. Perhaps because of this, the Arryns decided that Yellowfang would be an exceptionally skilled warrior, standing out from her first moons as an apprentice as a legendary hunter and uniquely skilled asset in battle. She not only has no problem with being a warrior, but actually exceeds Raggedpelt in ability and acclaim. Well, now we're all proud of Yellowfang, but didn't we need her to be a medicine cat? How are we gonna get her there if she wants to be a warrior and is really good at it? Well, of course, we're going to retcon her as having a superpower. That'll do the trick. So, Yellowfang has an ability that forces her to feel the injuries and sicknesses of cats around her. This makes it difficult to go about daily life, or especially engage in battle, and encourages her to go to Sagewhisker more often with notices of cats who are having pain of some kind. When she becomes a medicine cat, with practice and exactly one tip from Sagewhisker, who has no experience in this, she is able to block out the thoughts to focus on her own body and experience less of the pain. StarClan never guides either her or Sagewhisker on what this is or how to deal with it, but we are led to believe through Sagewhisker's framing that she was given this power to point her towards becoming a medicine cat. Let me be the first to say that this is utter foxdung. First of all, why does she have to keep this a secret? If she had a StarClan-given power pointing her towards being a medicine cat, it would make her shift in position much more accepted among her clanmates. There is absolutely no reason why her friends, family, and allies need to be kept in the dark. But maybe that's just the secret identities trope rearing its head like it did for the Power of Three trio. All of this was just to make sure Yellowfang had a reason to be a medicine cat, right? So I'm sure it will at least push her in that direction. No. No, actually, there's several reasons for this power to not be helpful at all as a medicine cat. First of all, she is more often inhibited with pain as a medicine cat than as a warrior. Your job focusing exclusively on treating cats who are sick or injured or in labor means you will always have to be in proximity to those very cats and can't get away from the pain, while warriors would only have to go near pain in battle. And remember that Yellowfang was learning to control her pain and succeeded at saving Raggedpelt from a badger in a spectacular solo fight before she ever became a medicine cat. It would actually be better with this power for Yellowfang to stay as a warrior, but get Sagewhisker's one tip on how to maybe control it so she could continue to fight in battle. Also, if this power was intended to alert you when cats need your help, then a big problem comes in the fact that Yellowfang's power doesn't point her to another cat. She didn't know that Nutkit or Silverflame or Rowankit or anyone else was hurt until those cats came out and said so. All she would know, even with full understanding of her power, is that somewhere around her, someone is hurt, which is information that any warrior could volunteer anyway. It gives her an exact sensation of what is hurt, so it may work to help kits who can't articulate their pain, but overall, it is absolutely doing more work to distract her whenever she needs to do her job than it is helping her. And that's why, soon after she became a medicine cat, her power vanished almost completely. Yellowfang just learns to control her power and stops feeling it or bringing it up for the rest of the book. And of course the original arc's Yellowfang never had this power since they've retconned its existence in 9 years later, so it has very little overall impact on Yellowfang other than forcing her into a position that she didn't need to be forced into. What did it add to the story for Yellowfang to be forced into the medicine cat position rather than choosing it herself? Why couldn't Yellowfang have just chosen to be a medicine cat because of ShadowClan's violent culture? Or because she felt more mercy for the clans they were warring against? Or if they really wanted to break the age demographic to escape Okay, maybe we need to talk about this one. So, before this book, all we knew about Raggedkit and Yellowfang's relationship is that it was kept secret because it was breaking the code, it produced Brokenstar, and Yellowfang seemed to miss and honor Raggedkit's memory. This book makes Raggedkit an abusive partner. Legitimately. No, this is not a headcanon, it is not a personal interpretation of the text or projection based on my past. Raggedkit is objectively abusive and is noted for his abusive behavior through the entire book. He has short bursts of treating Yellowfang like the center of his universe, being happy with her and apologizing sincerely, interspersed with longer sections of him lashing out at her, refusing her every request, lying to or about her and forcing her to go along with it, blaming her for everything going wrong around them, or intentionally spiting her by spending time with a she-cat he does not care for, or going against any suggestions she makes. And at all times, even in his honeymoon periods, he refuses to accept her choices as possible, let alone correct, if they don't perfectly align with his. She doesn't really want to be a medicine cat. She doesn't really trust Russet Fur and Boulder. She doesn't really consider hunting in the middle of Leaf Bear to be more important than battle training. He twists her words to suit his own devices and asks her to feel guilty for anything that makes him upset, whether or not she was even involved. Yellowfang notes several times how manipulative his current actions or words are, but she can't help caring for him as well, and being hurt when he ignores, spites, or chastises her. Littlebird even speaks to Yellowfang about not rushing into a relationship with him, and although she doesn't say or allude to the abusive behavior, she is definitely concerned about Yellowfang getting into a relationship with him on the timeline she does. This is just objectively an abusive relationship. I don't know if it was intentionally written as abusive, but it was definitely written to be mean, with Raggedpelt constantly being in the wrong. The problem is that, with Sagewhisker ignoring Yellowfang's agency and emotions on one side while trying to force her to be a medicine cat, and Raggedpelt ignoring Yellowfang's agency and emotions on the other side while trying to force her to be with him, Yellowfang herself ends up battered down in a no-win situation where she can't call any cats friends and has to burn bridges no matter the choice she makes. It is a miserable spot to be in or to read about. Even if this was intentional, the book doesn't give any solution for this setup, and so the reader is left feeling more and more uncomfortable, fearful, or even angry as the book goes on. Yellowfang is expected to just put up with their cruelty until they each die, and then she is bogged down by an even worse situation. Because remember, Raggedkit and Sagewhisker are still remembered, at the end of this book and in the first arc, as noble cats, since they were at least better than Brokenstar. Which brings us handily to the man himself. Brokenstar was shown in the first arc to be a uniquely cruel and careless leader who ruled over a very short period, about 6 to 8 moons total, including Into the Wild, and broke the code countless times. He was an unabashedly big bad evil guy whose only note of interest was being the son of Yellowfang and Raggedkit. This book tells us that Brokenstar was actually a divine punishment to the clans as a whole for how they drove out Sky Clans so many generations ago that no one alive even knows they existed. This is stupid. Who are they punishing? ThunderClan did the most to drive SkyClan out at the time, and they end up being the least touched by Brokenstar. Why are we punishing cats who weren't involved in the SkyClan exile at all? How are we expecting them to learn anything from this punishment when we not only aren't directing it at the right people, but also don't tell the clans what they're being punished for? How is anyone ever supposed to learn a lesson if they aren't even aware of the deed they're supposed to be learning from? Much like the Yellowfang power, this is a retcon that was never conceived of in the first arc and doesn't even have much impact on this book. Molepelt and Silverflame show up to give doom dreams periodically, and Featherwhisker makes some comments asking about how ShadowClan and its medicine cats are doing, but none of them impact the trajectory of the plot at all. And in fact, Silverflame tells us that they refused to intervene because they were convinced it was fate anyway. You could absolutely remove this entire element of the book without anything being lost. But Brokenstar being a divine punishment does have one purpose, in that it casts him as purely evil and feeds easily into the next concern with him. Brokenstar is framed simultaneously as a cat-born evil, destined for evil, with evil blood in his veins, and as someone who was trained by his circumstances to become the cat he was. Now, one might look at his upbringing under Lizardstripe, the intense bullying and exclusion by his kitten peers, being mocked away from Yellowfang, the only support figure who loved him unconditionally and provided him another path, the culture in ShadowClan of intense competition and power being the only tools of success, and the coddling of his father in nothing but his battle tactics and promised status in the clan, and say, wow, this sure seems like a story of a kitten made evil primarily by the circumstances and cats around him. However, this would clearly be a mistake, because though we spent nearly 15 chapters building up every detail of Broken Tail's descent into cruelty and a lack of care for anything except domination, the book continuously reminds us, with doom and gloom dreams, prophecies, and evil burned into newborn Brokenkit's face, that all of this was predestined and unstoppable. It may seem like a contradiction, or even a waste, to put so much story time and importance into each of these separate framings of Broken Tail, considering each one diametrically undercuts the other, but at the very least, no matter which path you deem is correct, we at least know it wasn't Yellowfang's fault. Sorry, what? What do you mean? Oh, to heck with you, StarClan. Alright, so StarClan takes this opportunity to blame Yellowfang and her relationship with Raggedpelt for creating Broken Tail. They don't blame Raggedpelt, but do blame Yellowfang, who clearly should have known better than to continue being with a cat she loved and had loved before being forced to be a medicine cat, and breaking it off just too late to avoid a pregnancy. After all, there was absolutely no guidance they could have given her that would have changed her mind, either getting her away from being a medicine cat or being with Raggedpelt. She was doomed to make bad choices. Oh, and she was also doomed to fail to help Brokentail grow into a better cat, even though StarClan themselves were the ones who suggested she try to guide the young Tom in a better direction. Oh, and don't forget that Raggedkit blames Yellowfang for the clan ending up the way it does and for how Brokentail was raised, because he still thinks everything would have gone fine if she followed his every order. And the clan ends up hating her when Brokentail manipulates them, since they didn't like her already for being grumpy and trying to get them to stop injuring themselves and killing their own clanmates. And Yellowfang blames herself because she's convinced that she should have heeded the doom dreams and done something different, even though the only direction that ever accompanied those doom dreams was make your own choice. Yellowfang is, in this book, a cat who befalls every fate and ends up shamed, guilty, and miserable, despite getting to make almost no choices of her own and being the singular, intelligent, and compassionate cat in all of ShadowClan. That makes it very difficult for me to see any of Yellowfang's secret as a worthwhile depiction of her past, and it is at the very least a miserable book to read. There are no bright spots, nice relationships, or character growth or insight. Every detail you discover in Yellowfang's secret can make you like it less and less. There is nothing to gain from reading it and everything to lose, and I will endeavor to leave it behind going forward. So yeah, this remains my least favorite book. Next time, we will be discussing... Oh, it's another tragedy. But perhaps one written with slightly more quality and intention when we return for the next episode of our trip through time.